Following the Civil War, the railroads boomed across the American landscape, and it led to the creation of some of America's first rich and powerful businessmen. As a review, remember that the creation of the Transcontinental Railroad altered America. The trip from Omaha to San Francisco took 1 week, and it led to the decline of the old Oregon Trail and stagecoach trips west. This map shows the railroad track that had been laid across the United States. The green lines are track that was laid in 1870, and the red lines are track that was completed by 1890. The United States became linked by this new form of transportation. The linking of states by railroad led to the need for standard time zones. Time was not synced across the nation and could vary in some instances from up to 12 minutes from city to city. This became a huge issue when trying to keep trains on schedule. Due to the need to keep the trains on schedule, the time zones were created, and time in America was finally synced. Standard time zones between American and Canadian railroads began around 1883, but it would not be until 1918 that all Americans would be forced to embrace it. In this map, you can see the time zones of the United States in 1913. They are way different than the time zones today, which you can see here in this map. Previously, we had also looked at the farmers and their connections to the railroads. The farmers were one of the first to suffer to the power of the railroads. Farmers began to band together in organizations such as the Grange Movement. One of the goals of the Grange was to combat the railroads. Here in the cartoon, a farmer with Grange written on his hat is warning Americans under the track from a train coming, with extortion, bribery, and oppression written on some of the train cars. After the Grange Movement, the Farmers' Alliances and the Populist Party would also try to combat the power of the railroads on behalf of the United States farmers. The abuse of the farmers was not the only atrocities committed by the railroads. There was also scandal and bribery that was connected to railroads and U.S. politicians. The Credit Mobilier was one instance of corruption and scandal at the hands of the railroads. The Union Pacific was given large construction contracts and land grants by the U.S. government. Union Pacific stockholders created a company separate from the Union Pacific that was getting some of these large contracts. Shares of this company were given or sold to influential congressmen who would in favor keep government contracts streaming to the companies. The sham company, the Credit Mobilier of America, would then charge the government large fees and expenses for work that the Union Pacific Railroad was really doing. The money received by the Credit Mobilier of America from the government contracts went to stockholders who profited massively, and some of these stockholders were the congressmen that sent the federal contracts to the company in the first place. Scandals like this would usually crush political careers, and for some it did. However, other politicians were able to escape the blow of being implicated in the Credit Mobilier scandal. 2 members of the House were censored, meaning that they can no longer speak in Congress, which basically killed their careers. But the outgoing Vice President, Schuyler Colfax, the incoming Vice President, Henry Wilson, and Representative James Garfield would all be implicated but escape the scandal. Garfield would even go on to be elected president in 1880. Another example of the hardships that were placed on Americans at the hands of the railroads can be seen during the Pullman strike. George Pullman had a company that produced Pullman passenger cars for many of the lines across America. The railroad cars were luxurious for travel during the time, similar to like flying first class today. Most of the factory workers who were employed making the cars lived in the town of Pullman within the city limits of Chicago. The town was owned by George Pullman, so the employees also owned their rents back to their bosses. The economic decline associated with the Panic of 1893 led to a wage cut for workers at Pullman. In 1894, however, their rent stayed the same, putting financial hardships on Pullman employees. Within that year, workers organized a 4-month nationwide strike that had the support of multiple railroad companies and severely impacted the United States. As the strike became a nationwide issue, the government took unprecedented steps to end the labor stoppage. They received a court order to break the strike, and President Cleveland sent troops to Chicago to enforce the ruling. When federal troops stepped in, riots ensued that would lead to a railroad yard being burnt down and the death of over 20 civilians. Cornelius Vanderbilt grew up poor and tough. The man who had enjoyed bare-knuckle boxing as a boy had made a name for himself through the shipping and the steamboat industry. Known as the Commodore, he sold all of his interests in steamboats and invested in railroads before the Civil War began. Vanderbilt was a ruthless businessman. To crush his competitors in New York, Vanderbilt blockaded the Hudson River Bridge by parking his own trains on it. The Hudson River Bridge was a major railroad bridge into New York City, and Vanderbilt owned it, but it was also used by his competitors. The blockade left freight on trains and crippled his competitors, causing their company's stock to plummet. When the stock began to fall, Vanderbilt quickly bought all available competitors' stock at low prices until he finally gained majority control of his competitors' companies. He would merge these lines with his own, and he created the biggest railroad in the United States, the New York Central Railroad. As his empire expanded, Vanderbilt also acquired the Hudson and Harlem lines in New York. Vanderbilt built Grand Central Station to connect all three lines in New York City. The project would be the biggest urban development project the United States had ever seen. Grand Central Station would take 2 years to build and sits on 22 acres of land. The station would become a physical symbol of the power of the Vanderbilts and is still in use today. In the photo on the left, you can see a picture of the interior shown in black and white in the early 1900s and in color in use today. One of the ways Vanderbilt acquired railroads was through the process of hostile takeovers. He would aggressively buy stock until he had the majority control of a company. The Erie Line was the busiest line in America, connecting Chicago and New York City, and Vanderbilt did not own it. Like he had done before, he began to buy stock in the Erie Railroad. Jay Gould and James Fisk of the Erie Railroad produced a plan to swindle Vanderbilt. As Vanderbilt began to buy stock, Gould and Fisk began to print more. The additional shares of stock made sure that Vanderbilt would not gain control of the majority of the Erie. Unknown to what was going on, Vanderbilt continued to buy Erie stock. The scandal would end up causing Vanderbilt to spend $7 million in Erie stock, a sum today that would be the equivalent of about $1 billion. Vanderbilt's son William would later take control of the company, but the Vanderbilt Company would never really have a solid public image in America. Vanderbilt owned large mansions in Rhode Island and New York. Here is the Vanderbilt Mansion on Fifth Avenue in New York City. The Vanderbilt Mansion still remains to this day the largest private home built in New York City. While the Vanderbilts were living in large houses, most Americans were living a much harder life. The Industrial Revolution would lead to a huge disparity between the rich and the poor. Vanderbilt was also not extremely generous with his fortune. He did not feel that it was his responsibility to give back to the poor. When asked about giving back to the public, he is quoted as saying, "The public be damned." J.P. Morgan grew up in a wealthy family that had ties to the banking industry. Morgan would fall into the family business, becoming one of the most influential bankers in America and a symbol of American financial stability. Morgan made his money by buying stock in companies that were struggling and making them profitable again. Sometimes warring companies would seek his advice and investments to settle their disputes. He had tremendous influence and pull in multiple industries, one of which was the railroads. Large investment firms such as J.P. Morgan and Company reorganized the railroads. As the 20th century dawned, 7 powerful companies held sway over 2/3 of the nation's railroad tracks. J.P. Morgan and Company over the years swooped up and consolidated many struggling railroad lines, and at one point he controlled 1/6 of the nation's railroads. The Interstate Commerce Act of 1887 was an attempt to regulate the railroad. The act created the Interstate Commerce Commission to oversee the railroads and their rates. The commission had a hard time gathering legal support or any way to punish or regulate the railroads. The railroads had continued to hold power due to the cooperation and dishonesty of politicians and the control that they held over the courts in America. In this cartoon, you can see the railroads represented as a snake blocking legislation from entering Congress. Regulation of the railroads was overly unsuccessful until a bold president in Teddy Roosevelt would be willing to stand up to corrupt corporations across the United States and protect American consumers and businesses. Ultimately, what led to the decline of the railroads was overbuilding and the economic decline of 1893, which led to the high unemployment rates and low production of American goods, which translated to low shipping of goods and people across the country. The Reading Railroad, with one of its locomotives shown here, was one of the many failing railroads in America around the turn of the century. It would have gone bankrupt like many others did following the Panic of 1893 if it had not been lucky enough to have been saved by the J.P. Morgan Company and some of his investors. And if you are wondering, yes, it is the Reading Railroad from the Parker Brothers game Monopoly that's used on one of the game board squares. In fact, some of the other railroads were also real American railroad companies. Of the remaining three on the Monopoly board, the B&O and the Pennsylvania Railroads were also real companies, but the Short Line Railroad was never a real American railroad.